This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources. We power the world through the energy of our people. Everywhere there are lighting poles, there's one more opportunity to save money. Intelligent Illuminations provides cost-effective wireless lighting solutions for roadway or area outdoor lights. Kanawha Valley Arena, Virginia's cowboy town, hosts Civil War reenactments, ATV rodeos, mud bogs, diesel truck pulls, and high school rodeo finals. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a very special welcome to our guest today, Delegate Brenda Pogge, Delegate Dickie Bell. Delighted to have the two of you here. We'll let our viewers know right away that we're having the conversation a couple of days before adjournment is expected. So we won't be talking about transportation and budget, since those are yet to be resolved, but want you to tell viewers about other issues that you've worked on. They may or may not have been your own bills, but other issues that you'd like to inform them about. They may be waiting the governor's signature, or they may be bills that are going to come back next year for another time. So, Delegate Pogge, you started serving in 2008.
That's right.
Delegate Bell, 2010. So we'll defer to 2008 and have you start, and then you're welcome to have a conversation with each other, and I'll keep a track of the time.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you asking us. I have been serving since 2008, and this year it seems to me to have been the easiest one so far. This is my 6th session here, and it's been a real smooth ride so far. Not very bumpy, of course, as you say. We're just getting ready to do work on transportation and the budget, and those two are the biggest issues that'll come before the General Assembly this year, but I don't want to spoil anybody's surprise. So, because we haven't taken that vote yet. But there's been a lot of good issues this year, and a lot of, I think, harmony. Knowing that we are going to, get something accomplished, knowing that we've worked really hard over the last 4 years, making government more efficient, making it more accountable to the citizens. And I've had a couple bills that were important to me this year that I put in. One of them was FBI checks for emergency medical personnel. That it's pretty important that we do that. There's been a couple times, and one of them I'm very familiar with, issues when someone who had a felony conviction in another state was able to obtain a license to be an emergency medical technician because we only did a state background check and not a national FBI check, and that's a pretty dangerous position. So we do have that bill did pass. It is on the governor's desk that we will now do the FBI check. And a couple other bills have been important to me, but right now I'll defer to my colleague and let him take some time.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. And David, thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be with you. I have been involved in K-12 education. It's been I wouldn't say a single focus, because I've had some other things working too, but since last session, when we had the original teacher contract bill, which failed, I went to work right away with the governor's policy team on education reform, and we worked diligently all spring and summer on the package that was put together, came up with a much better bill for the teachers. I think we came to the conclusion that we can't just take things away all the time, that there has to be something in there for the teachers and for education. And we cobbled out a pretty good bill, I think, and As it turns out, it passed this year rather easily, and several of the other measures that the governor sought to bring forward as education reform caught all the fire. So maybe I slid in under the radar, I don't know. But anyway, what we did, I think, is a good program for teachers and for K-12 education, not just today, but going forward and for the next decade or so.
I was going to comment that I think that it's an example, a great example of something that wasn't quite ready in the form it was last year. And as you said, you worked on it with folks, and then it was ready this second time.
That's right. And the most important part is that he worked with the stakeholders, everyone
Yes.
who was involved, and got them to support the legislation. So, you know, a lot of times, like I say, we had a little more harmony. Ideas that we worked on last year that caused a little scuffle in the halls. This year, we were able to bring some of those same ideas back and work together to get them through. And Dickie did a great job on that.
Brenda's exactly right. You know, I think that made the difference. I think that was all the difference. Last year we were in adversarial positions on a lot of these things. And this year, from day one, everybody was invited to the table. And we came in there considerably far apart on a number of points. But as time passed and as we continued to have the dialogue, we drew closer and closer together, and we were able to put together a bill that most people were happy with, at least one that the major stakeholders felt like they could support, and it made all the difference in the world.
So you were going to mention another bill now, something else you worked on.
I was, and we had the same type of experience as Dickie did with his bill, in that initially this particular bill drew a lot of scrutiny, and it was one, and you may remember, it was House Bill 1642 that dealt with parents having a fundamental right to raise their children. And the reason that we wanted that in the code is because it has been a part of common law and Supreme Court opinions and Virginia Supreme Court opinions for years, decades, and in the case of common law, hundreds of years. But it has never been put into the code at what level Virginia would protect a parent's right to direct the upbringing of their children. And so by making it in the code, and also by using the word fundamental, it makes a distinction between a fundamental right is held higher than an ordinary right. So both the bills now, there was my bill and there was Senator Bryce Reeves' bill, were companion bills. Both of them passed out of respective houses yesterday. They will have to pass out again, and then they'll go to the governor. But we had a little breakthrough in establishing that parents do have a much higher level of protection now in Virginia Code to give them the liberty to raise their children the way that they see fit. And so I'm really happy about that.
Excellent.
Well, another bill that I had, David, which has had sort of a little odyssey of its own, was a bill dealing with eating disorders. It is having been in the classroom recently, I'm a recently retired teacher, of course, I had seen up close over the last few years of my career just how serious a problem this was becoming, particularly in young females. And it can be a very deadly condition. It's mostly under the radar. Most folks are not aware of early signs and symptoms, and that includes parents, who should be the first line of defense. Everybody agrees with that. The bill was not popular with everybody, but surprisingly, it went through subcommittee not once but twice with unanimously. And it also went through the full committee unanimously after a lot of debate and passed both houses unanimously. So it's the hardest that I've worked since I've been here on a bill that never got a negative vote.
Yes.
It's on the governor's desk, and I have asked him to please consider signing it. I think there was some misunderstanding about it, that we were asking for a lot of things that really weren't in that bill. We just want folks to be aware of early signs and signals, because these kids, in my experience, are sending messages to us all the time that there's a problem and they need help. And it's that lack of awareness that we're trying to address in this bill. And hopefully we'll get it passed so that the schools and the divisions will get on board and just help us to notice these things. We're not asking them to implement treatment or even intervention or anything else, but it can be a devastating condition, and it has been very hard on a lot of families. So hopefully that'll get signed and passed into law, and we can continue to work in that area.
Excellent, excellent. As you think toward another session, are there some issues that you would like to mention, and before we would close, that you think you'll be working on for another year? Either of you?
Well, I think that we will do something about transportation, so that's an issue that's faced us every year since I've been here, and of course probably every year for the last 2 decades. So I think that'll finally be behind us, and then there may still be some areas as we, as a state, deal with what's happening with the Affordable Care Act that we'll probably be dealing with the next couple of sessions. But I think that will, some of it will be worked out in the budget, but some of it will be left undone, is my instinct. And so I think that we'll be looking at that again next year as well.
I think Brenda's right. I also think that the situation in Washington with the sequestration, the spending cuts, is going to impact us in Virginia. It can't help but impact us. And depending on how all that shakes out, we could have a lot or a little to deal with. So I think that's always there. I'm going to continue to address some reforms to K-12 education. I think we have a good system. No one denies that. We can have a great system. We can do things even better than we're doing them. And it just needs to be about more than not enough funding. We'll never have enough money for transportation or for education. There just won't ever be enough. So we've got to find the right ways to do things, and I'll continue to focus in that area.
Well, I want to thank each of you for being on This Week in Richmond and informing our viewers of some matters that they may not have been aware of, but now they are, and thinking about the upcoming session. Delegate Dickie Bell, Delegate Brenda Pogge, thank you so much. Look forward to having a conversation with you again in the future.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Dave.
much. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you. As we welcome our viewers back, we want to welcome 2 additional members of the House of Delegates, Delegate Matthew James, Delegate Mark Keam. Thank you very much for being on This Week in Richmond. We'll remind our viewers that we're having a conversation a couple of days before adjournment is expected, but by the time they're seeing this, then we would assume that you're back in your districts and adjournment has occurred. With that preface, let's talk about whatever issues that you'd like to inform viewers about, not only back home, but also around the state. So either one of you start, and feel free just to talk with each other, and I'll keep track of the time.
Well, thank you, David, very much for your time and for inviting us back. I appreciate the service that you provide to all of us while we're down here in the General Assembly. And this year being a short year, I think that most of us were prepared to deal with 1, maybe 2 major issues. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The big issue of this year, of course, was transportation. I applauded the governor publicly when he announced earlier in the year that he wanted to tackle transportation. As you know, David, that's an issue that we've been unable to solve for a long, long time. It's been 25, 26 years since we had a real serious effort at comprehensively looking for new transportation revenue sources. So the fact that the governor opened that door was, I think, helpful. And here we are today about to vote on the final version. And I think one way or another, I think I'm just glad that we were able to address transportation this year.
Yeah, same here. I mean, this has been a really my second short season here, but it's been really a very robust session for me. I've tried to focus, in addition, on transportation, economic development issues that are going to impact not only Hampton Roads but the rest of the state, and just trying to keep the environment to create more jobs, create more revenue, get the economy back on track, and help our constituents at home increase their lifestyle.
You both have worked a great deal over your time here on economic development and on tourism too, and I guess the two of them are somewhat intertwined.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, what I find interesting is that Matthew and I came in together in 2009, and we're very excited to work together because he and I have similar backgrounds. We both have been in both the private and the public sector side working on job creation. And I think that's the one area that all of us, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, wherever you're from, I think we find the common ground that if the state does better and we bring more jobs and more money into the state, there's more revenue for the state to then use for all the public services that we need to provide. And so I've been focused on creating new jobs as well as bringing people here, whether they're tourists, they're visitors, they're workers, to come here and spend money in Virginia.
And I think that's really one of the more beneficial things that you get from having to spend this time away from your family and friends at home. You know, working hard to get legislation about major tax credits back online, and the tourism zone bill that I sponsored a couple of years ago, and actually see communities using that and see them creating new jobs, as well as local things. Like this year we were successful in working with the city of Norfolk at getting a public arts program back online so that they can get correct synergy around that. And I think that's what we're here for. And I too, just like Mark, applaud the current administration as well as the delegates and senators in finally embracing coming up with a dedicated revenue stream for transportation. We've been way too long in working on that. Hopefully we'll have some resolution for it, because in Hampton Roads, our call has always been one: if we didn't fix the transportation problem, our risk was we were going to be what I would call an economic development cul-de-sac. You can't get product in and out of Hampton Roads without some sort of solution with a dedicated revenue stream.
I mean, the reality is when anybody, whether it's a company in the United States or a company overseas, anybody is looking to relocate themselves or start a new business venture, and they're looking at different opportunities across the country, they look at mainly a couple of things. One, of course, is education level of that school. Can we find good workers in that state that can provide us with the work resources? And that's where the education comes in.
Right.
We're very proud of our education system in Virginia, and we've worked really hard to maintain the best schools that we have in the country. The second, though, is infrastructure. I mean, can we get our folks to come to work, don't get stuck in traffic, and make sure that they're being productive at the work instead of being on the road? And so those two things, transportation and education, have been very core principles that we've been trying to work on. And again, Governor McDonald opened the door on both of those reform ideas, and so that's where we are today.
And I think once that we can get transportation going, I think then we can focus a lot of equal energy on workforce development and education, and those are the things we need to do to keep the economy growing. I know we had a few things that we worked on this year in terms of helping the community college and the four-year schools. I think we still, in my opinion, we still need to do some things to help the K through 12 community and foster that, because I'm a big fan as a product, and my daughter's a product of public education. We need to make sure that, because that's really the continuity of companies coming in and out. No company wants to stay or relocate to a community that doesn't have a good educational infrastructure in place.
From Northern Virginia, from Hampton Roads, although, as you said, the final vote hasn't been taken yet on transportation, but there's some initiatives to have additional opportunities for funding in your two regions of the Commonwealth.
Well, as I understand it, I haven't seen the legislation, so we both Mark and I share the fact that we like to read the legislation before we make a definitive comment about it. But I understand there are going to be two local options, one in Northern Virginia and one in Hampton Roads. And I think that's important because one of the things when I ran, I believe that good solutions have to have the input of the localities. And by creating a local option, you really empower the local region to come together as a group and to solve their own issues. Similarly, one bill that we worked on gives communities the right to, for the port, if a port-related company comes in, they can do a revenue sharing without having to ask for Richmond's approval. I think that those are the kinds of empowerment that we need to give to our localities, and I think a local option gives the local people the right to say, okay, these are our local issues. Let's get together and face them together and figure out how to do them.
Well, the local option is critical. There's no question about that. We need to make sure that the money that's raised in the more populated areas like Northern Virginia or in Hampton Roads, that money that our constituents will be using and spending will stay right there in Northern Virginia and in Hampton Roads so that it benefits our neighborhoods and our infrastructure. But the difference from this version of the bill compared to other bills that we've had in the past that dealt with local options and other options that I know we've seen some of those bills this year as well. The difference is that this one is more innovative, in some ways more bold, and for us in Richmond, it's a tougher vote for us. And the reason is because instead of asking the local counties or local zones to adopt a referendum or some other way to trigger that new revenue source coming in, we here in Richmond, through the General Assembly, will mandate that. In other words, we'll be the ones that will have to take the vote to raise the taxes for Northern Virginia and for Hampton Roads, so we don't go through any constitutional concerns that were raised a few years ago when we had the other transportation bill. Now, that's on the one hand a tougher vote for us because as politicians, nobody likes to raise taxes, but we think this is an important thing that we have to do. On the other hand, it's also a clean way to do this so that we don't come back and revisit this and say, well, this county didn't do this, that county didn't do that, therefore the whole thing falls apart. We want it to be as safe and strong as possible so that when we pass this bill this week, that bill goes into effect right away and then Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads people will start getting the benefits of that.
Other issues that you've worked on, or as the session is winding down and the next one's not that far away, other issues that you see that you'll be working on that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I think a lot of the issues that I try to work on, we do a couple of surveys and as everybody go out and talk to folks, I like to reserve a big chunk of my time in getting some things with my constituents, finding out what they want to do or where they would like for us to go. I would like to continue to revisit the arena of restoration of rights of nonviolent felons. That's a big thing in my district right now. A lot of people who have paid their time, paid their crime, and they cannot vote or find the process a little bit harder. Again, I mentioned earlier, K through 12 is one thing that we would like to do in terms of strengthening our public education system and just overall workforce development, economic development. I'd like to try to also get a new revenue stream or some incentives to help urban areas in terms of workforce development training as well and economic development incentives. Those are some of the things that I would like to do. Again, I try to focus on things that I know and things that fit my background, and those are some of the things that I'd like to work on. But more importantly, I'd like to get as much input from my constituents as what would they like for me to achieve while I'm up in Richmond.
And that's a good point. And you know, Matthew is really a great delegate in that he does listen to what's happening in his home district. He and I sit together in the House, and we've worked together very closely. And it's amazing how many times he talks about, oh yeah, so-and-so back home told me this, so-and-so back home told me that. And so he's got his ear to the ground, which I think is good for all of us. For me, there are a couple things I'd mention. One is, there's one issue that we talked about this year that hasn't been resolved, and I don't think it will be resolved by the end of this session, which is Medicaid expansion. It is a very big issue, as we know from last year, 2 years ago when the President signed the Obamacare health care law into effect. He gave the option for states to expand our Medicaid expansion by allowing for more uninsured in our own states to be covered by the federal program with a big chunk of change coming in from the federal side to match. Unfortunately for us in Virginia, our governor has declined to accept that. And so in the Senate side of the budget, they're trying to encourage that happening. On the House side, we're standing strong. Unfortunately, my other side of the aisle has decided that they don't want to accept that. So whatever happens this year, if we don't resolve that issue will be pending for the next year, because we don't want to lose that money. It's a lot of billions of federal dollars that will be going to other states that we won't be able to take advantage of. So we'll be working on that throughout the rest of the year outside of the General Assembly. The other thing I'll just mention is we've had a number of tax issues come up this year. Everything from tax credits, tax exemptions, tax deductions. Is this a fair tax? Is this a wrong tax? Do we tax these folks? Do we broaden it out? Lots of tax discussions, including in the transportation bill. These are not issues that we can resolve in 45 days or 60 days. So last year we created a joint subcommittee to look at tax preferences in Virginia and to really take our time studying it. I'm one of the members of that subcommittee, and so we meet throughout the year. And one thing I want to do this year outside of the session is really understand, talk to every stakeholder, businesses, residents, homeowners, everybody else to find out how does our tax policy work for you, where are the unfairness, and as we kind of revisit the wholesale, you know, how does Virginia do things, we want to come back with a set of proposals for next year to be able to say, by fixing this and that, we can learn from other states. This is a way that we can move Virginia forward and become a very pro-business, at the same time, pro-job state. So I'm very excited about that.
Sounds like a busy time leading up to that next session, and whether it's restoration of rights or economic development, or whether it's looking at perhaps some major reforms in the tax structure. So I want to thank each of you very much for being on This Week in Richmond. Delegate Matthew James from down in Hampton Roads, Delegate Mark Keam from Northern Virginia, and we'll look forward to having conversation with you on during the year. You're going to be here in Richmond on some tax reform issues.
Absolutely.
You'll probably be here on workforce
Yes,
and
sir.
other matters. So
Yes.
we'll look forward to finding a time that we can talk on in the fall and about, as you're getting closer, perhaps to some filing some legislation for the next session.
Thank you.
So thank you both very much, and we thank our viewers, and we'll be seeing our viewers weekly during the year.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. Everywhere there are lighting poles, there's one more opportunity to save money. Intelligent Illuminations provides cost-effective wireless lighting solutions for roadway or area outdoor lights. Kanawha Valley Arena, Virginia's cowboy town, hosts Civil War reenactments, ATV rodeos, mud bogs, diesel truck pulls, and high school rodeo finals. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.